Hi everybody, welcome to willynillies.com. Today we're going to show you how to build a super simple series GLH 250. I've already punched out all the fuselage parts, as you can see here on the table, just to help speed up the video process. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to grab one of the fuselage sides. Both fuselage sides are identical, so it doesn't matter which one. And then you're going to grab this former right here, what we call former F2. You want to make sure the hole is on the top side to match the top of the wing. This former goes right here in this slot and tab right here. And do not glue it at this time. Do not glue anything until I tell you to. Then you're going to take the square or the rectangle battery tray, and it goes immediately behind former F2 into that slot. Varying thicknesses of the supplied wood, might have to push just a little bit. Don't force it too hard or you could possibly break it. It doesn't matter which side that you put in because it's even on both sides. It's the same length. So I'll put that back in there. Again, do not glue this until I tell you to. You'll see why here in just a few minutes. Then we're going to take former F3, and it goes at the trailing edge of the wing mount. Next we're going to take the other fuselage side and carefully line up those tabs from former F2, the rear battery tray, and former F3. It's a little tricky sometimes, but if you hold your tongue just right, it'll work. Sometimes it's easier to pick it up so you can see all the. There we go. That piece was a little bit tighter than normal, but it'll work. I'll put that former F3 back in here carefully. Okay, there we go. Okay, again, do not glue any joints at this time. What you want to do is you want to pick it up, make sure all the tabs are seated fully, and just kind of make sure everything's squared up and fits nicely. Okay, at this point you can take some thin C8 glue. I highly recommend using a capillary tube so you can precisely put the least amount of glue on there that is necessary. I like to start with the rear battery tray and just put a couple drops on each side to secure it to the wall. Put just a light amount of pressure. Don't put a whole lot of pressure or you'll twist the fuselage and get it out of alignment. Okay, with the thin CA glue it sets up almost instantly, so we're ready to move on. Next step is I like to run a bead of glue down each side of former F2 and give it a second to set up. And then just kind of make sure everything's still nice and straight and fully engaged. Then I run a bead of glue on former F3. I'll let that set up for a minute. Okay. Now you can see it's already getting pretty strong. Everything fits nicely. We do design all of our aircraft in-house, and we do all of our laser cutting in-house. So we have very good control over the quality and the fit and process of all of our kits. Okay, the next step is you want to take the front battery tray and slide it into place very carefully. Line up the tabs with the slots and very gently pull the front of the fuselage sides together. Very, very gently. Don't try to force it all at once. Okay. Now once you've seated those, just keep a light pressure to keep the fuselage sides together. And this automatically lines up the fuselage sides and keeps it, and since we've already glued these two formers in the rear battery tray, it keeps everything nice and straight and square. So go ahead and glue the front battery tray in place. Again, it just takes a little bit of glue. And with the ncaa and the capillary tube, it really does a nice job. I highly recommend using the capillary tube. Okay, now once that's set, you can install your F1 firewall and motor mount. On the GLH, it is absolutely necessary that this is assembled with your motor installed before you mount it onto the airframe. If you don't, it'll be almost impossible to reach the bottom two nuts to secure your motor unless you cut some of the battery tray away. You can cut some of the battery tray away, it won't hurt anything, but it's just an unnecessary step. So go ahead and fit your motor mount. You may have to trim just a little bit away to get clearance for the nuts that are on the motor mount. And they do. That's good. Doesn't take much. And repeat on the other side. Sorry if you can't see this, but I'll show you a picture or close up here in a second. Okay, now do another dry fit. See where we're at. That sounds good. There we go. Okay, it's very important to make sure that it's fully seated into the tabs and the slots. And once it is and you're satisfied, go ahead and glue it in place using the ncaa and capillary tube. You can use epoxy for this. We do include a blank firewall mount in case you want to use a Cox TDO or 020 engine. There's still lots of us guys that like to fly the old Cox engines. So I do include a motor mount so that you can mount a TDO 20. Okay, now that that's in place, let's we will grab the aft fuselage bottom piece. That's the one that has the holes and the cooling holes in the back. You turn your fuselage side upside down and start aligning it in the slots. Don't force it all at once, just a little bit at a time. That's in place. It'll pretty much hold itself. The tolerances on the tabs and slots are pretty close, so once you have them in place, it'll hold it pretty darn close. Then once you get the top in, you just kind of want to, whoops, there we do that. Just take your time and make sure everything's lined up, kind of make sure everything's nice and square, and it is. Okay, so take former F4. It looks like this. The two big holes are just for lightning and to allow cooling air to go through the fuselage out the tail. The two little holes are push rod guides for your rudder and elevator. We'll explain that later. You want to gently put it in place. Again, it lines up with the two slots that are in the fuselage side right there. It will be a looser fit simply because we need to allow for the different thicknesses of the wood supply that we get. Probably should have put that in before. Okay. Again, we just want to double check to make sure everything's nice and square. Okay. Now you just want to gently push in on the fuselage sides. Don't put a whole lot of pressure. Use your glue and run a bead on this bottom aft portion of the floor and let it set up. Double check to make sure it's straight. And then we want to do the same thing for the aft fuselage top. We'll just glue the first section. Give it a second to set up. Double check. And it's still nice and straight. And then we want to repeat that process. Make sure everything's fully seated. On the aft portions behind F5. Be careful not to glue your fingers to the wood. It's easy to do. Okay, and then repeat on the top aft portion. Run your bead of glue in there. At this point, I like to go ahead and glue former F5 in all the way around. Glue my finger. Okay. And then we want to secure the little bit that we couldn't get to at the tail. Put a couple drops in there and let it run down the seam. And repeat on the top. Okay, that completes the aft portion. At this point, you'll want your electronic speed control, or ESC, and you want to go ahead and route the wires underneath the battery tray and hook them up to your motor. And once you do that, you can glue the forward bottom fuselage piece in place. You're going to just tab and notches. I recommend using medium CA, or you can use thin CA and access the glue joints through these lightning holes. I don't have an ESC here ready to be hooked up, so I'm not going to glue this in place at this time. But you can do that right now if you like, if you're ready. This is the aft battery box, and it just simply goes at the aft end of the battery box. You can adjust it. I like to adjust it back just a little bit, just to make sure I got plenty of clearance for the bottom of the wing. And then just go ahead and put a few drops of glue on there to glue it in place. this little piece here is the front hatch pull down block, and it gets glued to the very front of the fuselage. It will take a drop of glue on each side. That's all done. Ready to go. Next, we'll grab our hatch pieces. This is the reinforcement and the tab that locks under the piece that we just glued in. This is a little tricky to get set up, but you can see the hatch fits pretty nicely. What we want to do is make sure that you line up the aft edge of this with the front edge of your hatch. And once you do that, you flip it over and center it up on both sides so there's an even amount of the hatch sticking on both sides. Once you're satisfied that you have it lined up, take a couple drops of glue and secure the hatch reinforcement in place. Now you'll want to wait a few minutes to make sure the glue is completely dry before you put it onto the fuselage. It's happened to me. I've gotten in a hurry and I've put it in before the glue was dry, and we'll go ahead and glue the hatch to the top, and then you have to cut it off. So give it just an extra minute to set up. Maybe run your fingers around the edge, make sure that the glue is set up. And it feels like it is, so then you can go ahead and fit your tab. Depending upon the screws and nuts that are included, you'll have to adjust the length of this tab so that it will fit in there. I just use a sanding block or a sharp knife. Cut the tab down some. As long as you have about 1/8 of an inch of the tab sticking under, that's plenty. I just need something to grip onto. Okay, I need just a little bit more. I think I'll finish that off with the sanding block. Okay, and that completes the hatch assembly. When you cover the airplane, you can use a covering hinge, or I prefer to use Blenderm tape or Scotch tape, just a short piece to act as a hinge so you can lift it up. I also secure the aft end with a piece of Blenderm or Scotch tape, just for the ease and simplicity and the lightweight. It doesn't get much simpler than that. So, at this point, you have a completed Super Simple Series GLH 250 fuselage. At this point, you can move on to the horizontal stabilizer. You simply punch it out of the sheet and give it a light sand around the leading edges. Give it a light sand on top and bottom to make it nice and smooth for the covering. Do that for your elevator and your vertical fin and rudder. On the elevator, we recommend beveling the leading edge at 45 degrees and using a covering hinge. Again, that's the simplest, lightest, least inexpensive way to do it. You can use Blenderm tape or packing tape, but it has a tendency to peel up with heat. But the heat shrink covering, the hinges last a lot longer. You can do it either way. Just keep an eye on them because this airplane's really fast when you push it and you use a high-pitch prop. You want to make sure that you don't induce any flutter from a loose control surface. The rudder and vertical fin, the same way. You'll want, if you want to use a rudder, which it really isn't needed. This is a great bank and yank type airplane. The rudder really isn't necessary. The extra servo and push rod add some weight. I don't really see any real benefit to a racing plane like this that uses a rudder. But if you want to do a lot of sport flying, like point rolls, things like that, a rudder always comes in handy. So it's up to you. You can, if you don't want to use the rudder, you just simply line it up and glue it to the vertical fin. Cover it and you're done. The horizontal stabilizer, it's real easy to fit. It just goes into these slots here. The tab and slot that you see there, you just keep it lined up in the center, and slide it all the way up until it bottoms in the slot. Okay. The vertical fin has a tab that will go into that slot that we just use to keep our horizontal stabilizer straight. And once it's in there we go. What that all does is that keeps everything square and nice and straight. Typically you don't want to glue these into place until you've covered them. And when you cover them, you want to make sure that you don't cover where the glue goes to attach the horizontal stabilizer or vertical fin to the fuselage. You need that wood-to-wood contact with the glue. Very important for strength. If you glue covering material to the wood, it will come loose. It's just a matter of time. It may feel strong to begin with, but it will come loose. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we've completed a Super Simple Series GLH 250. It's a very nice airplane to fly. It's fast. It's faster than you want it to be sometimes. Pay very important attention to the control throws we've listed in the kit. If you exceed those throws, you probably will crash. The throws have been tried and tested, and they're a good common ground for you to start with. If you want it more sensitive, you can always make it more sensitive, but the rates that we've set in the manual are a good starting point. Also pay very close attention to the weight and balance, the center of gravity location. It's right in the middle of the center of gravity range. Once you've test flown it and felt it out and see how it flies, you can adjust it a little bit forward or aft to your liking. But please pay attention to the specs that I've included in the kit package for the control throws and the center of gravity. If you do that, you'll have a sweet flying airplane. So with that, we'll conclude this video on the GLH 250 fuselage construction. And may the winds be gentle, the sun to your back, and God bless.